Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1775 AN. Today's date is January 25th, 2019, and the title of the episode is Central Banks Just Telegraphed They Are Trapped. We all know the holidays are officially over, and millions of Americans, they've piled an enormous amount of credit card debt over the last couple of months. Now is the time to take control over your financial destiny. Trade Genius will show you how to make money in any market conditions. Here is a trade that made customers almost 13% profit in December on GDXJ. The Trade Genius signal notified a buy at 26 and a sell at 30. Right now through the winter season, you can save over 50% off their bundled specials, or use promo code WINTER for 45% off all non-bundled items. Check out TradeGeniusAcademy.com. Tell them X22 sent you. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, we've been talking a long time about the central bank and how, in the beginning, they were trying to bring down the economy, and they had to move this to another area. And to cover it all up, they needed an event. There's a problem now. There is no event. The central bank, they're exposed. Everybody can see what is happening. Everyone will understand that they're responsible. And we can see already they realize what is happening. They realize they've lost control. They've lost control of the Fed. Remember, there are many different central banks, and then we have the IMF, the BIZ, and then the Rothschilds who are controlling all of it. The Fed was their tool right now. They lost control over it. And from what the IMF says, we can see there is confirmation that they're nervous and afraid. And we're going to be talking about this in just a minute. But first, let's go to the economy here and what is happening. Now, we just came out of the holiday season. We're in January right now. And the holiday season was brutal. It was very brutal on U.S. retailers. Now, I know it seems like everything was great, but Macy's, Nordstrom, Signet, and many other stores were all reporting that sales slumped. Macy's said that sales fell after Black Friday and Cyber Monday until the week of Christmas. It had to cut its sales forecast. It had to give discounts. Nordstrom, well, they confirmed this, that the trend is not going in their favor, and they had to take their clothing and they had to cut the prices on the clothing. Now remember, this was brick and mortar. This was online sales. They're telling you that the American people, they're no longer out there spending the way they used to. Remember, a lot of people, they took their credit cards. They used it for the holiday season. And now the bills are coming due. And just because you use credit cards, and the mainstream media has this unbelievable way of making you think that sales are fantastic when they say, well, MasterCard and Visa, they reported this is how much people have spent. No, they didn't spend any of this. They took out loans to purchase the merchandise. They have to pay this back. And what normally people do is they pay it over time, and there's interest attached. So they're reporting on credit card spending. This is not the money the people actually have to spend. If we took and stripped away all credit cards, this economy would implode on itself in a matter of seconds. This is what the central bankers needed to do to keep this entire system operational. Because once we came off the gold standard, you notice going into the 80s, because the 70s, they were trying to figure everything out, normalize everything. Going into the 80s, credit just opened up, and all of a sudden everyone was able to get credit, and they can lease or finance cars. They can take out credit cards, and this kept on going, and it got worse and worse and worse until here we are today, because they need to counteract what they have done. They've taken us off the gold standard, and they created currency, devaluing the dollar. How do you make up for this? Well, a lot of people use credit to purchase things, but over time, that has to come to an end. It can't go on forever. I know a lot of people think it can, but it really can't. If you're in a home and you're working and you're spending money and you're spending a lot more money than what you're bringing in, eventually what happens? It's called bankruptcy. You can't continue on because the interest payments the principal, and everything else, you can't make those payments, because if you're not getting raises and your salary is stuck and fixed, there's no place to go. It's the same with the government. Eventually, it comes to an end. Eventually, something has to give. And we are at the end of this central bank cycle. The problem is that the central banks have no way out of this. It seems like it's a perfect storm because Trump, the patriots, came into office while all this was happening. Very interesting if you really think about it. At the end cycle of the central bank, when they are at their weakest. I mean, let's go back to post 2575 for a second. This was December 10th, 2018 from Q. The plan to have the Fed raise rates, this is in brackets in bold, steep incline beginning March 2019 in an effort to kill the economy prior to 2020 presidential election is known and planned for. Structure change coming. So Q is telling us that they already knew this plan. They knew that the deep state, the central bank, way before anything, they were going to use this to show that Trump destroyed the economy and he should not be reelected. Now, remember, they didn't think he was going to make it this far. They thought from all the pressure from the mainstream media, from the intelligence organizations, from the Steele dossier, from everything, they thought they would have him out of office. Remember, they have multiple plans to remove him. Impeachment, maybe an assassination, and then their ultimate is destroying the economy because they feel that's foolproof. I mean, except for assassination. Impeachment is never going to happen. But an economic disaster, people, again, when you hit them where their money is, their wallets, and you destroy everything that they've saved up, people become angry. They were hoping to use this. But they already understand and they know this plan. They've already taken action to fight against this. Who has control over the central bank? Well, the deep state, they do believe they have control. Trump is continually out there saying that I have the magic wand. I have the power to manipulate. I have the power. And it just does this magic wand just doesn't go to the stock market. It just doesn't go to manipulating the statistical numbers. It encompasses the Federal Reserve also. So the IMF is out there, and they have warned that, and they're afraid of, political rage, which will block the Federal Reserve's rescue efforts when the next crisis hits. Now, this is coming from David Lipton. This is the IMF's second highest official. And what this says to me is that they are telegraphing that they understand that they've lost control over the Federal Reserve, and they're very worried that if we enter this next crisis, which they know is coming, they know full well that we're going to be entering into a recession, depression, and their system will fall apart. They're worried and afraid that the Federal Reserve will not be able to bail the other central bankers out. He said, it is unclear whether the U.S. Federal Reserve would again be able to extend $1 trillion of swap lines to fellow central banks. Why? Because they know that Trump is in control. Remember, this entire system was based on a gigantic illusion which the central banks created. And of course, it was the deep state which helped them, where they manipulated a lot of the data in the government, which Trump is using against them right now. They knew, and they have always known, that since 2008, they only had a short window to move everything and cover it up. This is what they were in the process of doing. Now they don't have that event. Now the central banks are exposed. Now there are political forces that have taken control over the Federal Reserve. Actually, if we go back in time, we know the central bankers, they're worried about their independence, that government forces might be dictating to them what they need to do. So right now, what they're doing is they're telegraphing and saying, listen, we don't know if the Federal Reserve is going to bail out all the other central banks. Now, what happens when the Federal Reserve doesn't bail out the other central banks? What happens to the other central banks? Well, everything implodes on itself. Now, maybe the IMF can help out. Maybe the biz can help out. But once again, you can see the control right now. Will they be able to help out? No, because all these different countries, they hold the dollar. The Federal Reserve is in control of all these other central banks. They've propped them up in the past, and they're hoping they're going to be able to do this again, but I don't think it's going to happen, and this is why they're nervous and afraid. They're letting everyone know that this is going to go south really, really fast, and I believe this is part of the plan to expose the central banks for what they are. The only way to get people to understand how evil the central banks are is to show them what they're really about. And the only way to do this is to point the finger at them. Now, as we approach 2020, I do believe that Q, Trump, the Patriots, they are going to put off this recession. Now, when I say put off the recession, I mean, oh no, there's going to be no recessions, everything's going to be great. No, I think what's going to happen is the statistical numbers like the stock market, the unemployment numbers, the GDP numbers, they're going to use that to make it seem like everything is still good. And what's going to happen is the deep state is going to play their last card in their hand, and it will be nothing. And I think what's going to happen is as we move into the next term of Trump, which I do believe he'll get elected once again, I think that's when the transition will actually take place. That's when he'll have full control over everything, because during this period of time, and this is where I do believe that everything is going to start to break down because of everything that's going to happen. And this is not going to all happen at once. I think there's going to be many, many different stages because we have many parts of the plan all happening at once. And I think once we get into this area, I think they're going to try to make it as easy as possible for people transitioning into this new system. What will they tell the people? Well, they're going to have to point the finger at the Fed. They're going to have to audit the Fed. They're going to have to show the people what the central bank is all about. And I believe this is what they're planning to do. And at that point, I don't believe the deep state, the central banks, will have any power whatsoever. I think he will have all the power. The Patriots have all the power at that time. So I do believe the plan is moving forward. We can see the central banks, they are worried, they're afraid, they're very nervous because they understand what is happening right now. Think about what Trump has done since he came into office. Removed all these globalist trade deals, pointed the finger at the World Trade Organization, made everyone question these trade deals, set up bilateral trade deals, contradicted the Fed. I mean, think about what he's been doing here. Placed tariffs on China, making new trade deals with China. Because remember, I do believe they were moving a lot of the stuff over to China because they were the manufacturing powerhouse and they were going to use this country as their base of operation, just like they used the United States as their base of operation. Before 1940, they used the United Kingdom as their base of operation, and they just move from country to country. They don't really care about country. They don't have any allegiance to people or country or anything like that. They just use the countries up and then eventually move on to the next phase because their system only lasts for as long as possible, and then it completely breaks down. And at that point, they have to move to the next area and restart the whole thing all over again. But I think this time their plan was cut short. This time they didn't expect this. They never thought she would lose. So we are going to be going through this transition. It's going to get a lot worse on the people's level, not the statistical level, but on the people's level. This will allow Trump to bring more manufacturing into the country, build the country back up, create better trade deals. And this is all being done to help the United States transition into a system which is outside of the central bank system. Remember, during Andrew Jackson's time, everything was much smaller. It wasn't on a global scale. This is on a global scale. This is much, much larger than when Andrew Jackson took down the central bank. So it has to be done a little differently moving forward here, and this is what the plan is all about. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.